Hello? Can you hear me okay? Now, I have a question for you. If I were to take this mic, let's see what happens when it rolls around. Can you hear me when I talk like this without a problem? Is everybody good? If it starts to hum or whatever, I'll try to fix that. If you can't hear me, please, I will not be offended in any way. You can either give me an ear, or you can be like, hey, I can't hear you. I will be glad to be louder. Hi, how are you? I'm so glad you're here. This is my first time doing a book sandwiched in, and I have to say this is my first time, I don't know, I've been in book talks and book circles and other things, and I've been part of all sorts of stuff since I was an English teacher for 36 years. I taught at Red Creek, a little place up on Route 14, and then I was there for 3 years, and I taught for my other 34, 32, 33 years, whatever it is, at Canandaigua. So I have no problem getting in front of a bunch of people and having a talk. When we used to do community reads, probably because I had a theater background and they knew I didn't mind getting in front of other people, I used to run all of the community reads, and I would talk in front of the very large crowds with the authors and interview them when they came, which was, gosh, a delight. I really would love to talk to Percival now that I've had a chance to read it. My name is Schauman, and I'm so glad you're here. And we are going to talk about James by Percival Everett. And if you're not familiar with it, it is the retelling of Huck Finn from Jim the Slave's point of view. And this is your moment now where you're like, this is not at all what I thought we were going to. I thought we were doing Jane Eyre, and I don't want to be a part of it. How many people here have read James that I am talking to right now? Okay? And then, of course, the rest of you have not read it yet. I apologize if I ruin anything by telling you secrets that are going to be a part of reading it. I don't know how to talk about it without probably ruining some of the stuff. I don't know if I would call it ruining it. I have a feeling if you were to tell me everything I'm about to tell you, I'd still end up reading the book. I was pretty jazzed when my wife is the one who came up with this idea. I talked to AJ a couple of times about some books to think about, and if you don't know anything about me, I have never shied away, I guess, from taking on probably aspects that people are like, why the heck is this white guy talking about black subjects in our community? And I guess it goes back to the idea that I just thought it was necessary. There's been a lot of things that have happened in my teaching career where it has been made very clear to me that the community needed it. So I thought this was a great one to talk about. All right, so I'll get right into it. I hope you remember some of the stuff about Huck Finn. I will try to remind you of some things as I go. I thought it was an interesting book as I read it. How can you not have the one in mind as you do the other? And then when I'm all said and done, what I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to juxtapose and say, here's what came first, and isn't it interesting what he did with it? And then I'm going to talk about it because I think that's what, I'm an English teacher. And whether it goes all the way back to when I would teach Shakespeare, or I would teach other works that would come along, even when you go back to what you'd call classics, they usually had something that they were based on first. And if you really want to understand something from a new point of view, which is the second thing we're going to talk about, is this is a novel written by a black man about traditionally the dead white guy that gave us a story about Huck Finn, and now we get to hear it from a completely new point of view. So we have a juxtaposition of the new with the old, and then we have the point of view of the black man seeing a story told by the white guy about a young kid growing up in slavery South, and his understanding of what he saw, his uncivilized look at things, because let's face it, that's Huck's big thing from the beginning to the end, is going from what his, I don't want to call it, the family that he's surrounded with and how they want to civilize him, and then where we get to at the end. So I'm going to try to take us through the character of Jim, and I know that I'm going to be tainted with the idea that I'm a theater guy, so I look at this person as a character, and it's a piece of fiction, So if you're bothered by the way in which somebody might take something that existed beforehand and changes it, and let's face it, last time I checked, Huck Finn is in the public domain, and whatever he wants to do with it, he can. And I appreciate that. I actually outright enjoy it. During COVID, I was forced to do some stuff that I would normally never do when it came to live theater, which is I couldn't do live theater. So I had to make a film. And we couldn't just do anything we wanted, especially when it came to music. So I had to use things that were in the public domain, which meant I could do whatever I wanted with it. Jim, as we find out right from the beginning of it, as a character is not like the Jim we knew from the book, or at least what you'd probably expect. Jim, subversively, has become very educated, and he can read and he can write, and he knows his stuff. The interesting thing was, off the bat, the idea that he has language skills and he has speaking skills, but he cannot let anyone know about them. He doesn't even really let other fellow slaves know about it, but he has been teaching his children these skills and this knowledge behind everybody's back. Now, that did bother another English teacher that was reading this at the same time I was, and he was like, "But that really exists?" And of course, I had to look it up and do a little research myself, and apparently, yes, indeed, it did. Not only were there a lot of groups that existed at the time that would actually go, especially from the religious backgrounds, where they would teach slaves how to read and write, which slave owners did not like or care for in any way, shape, or form, but it only existed, again, as a way, as a part of the subversion that they would try to basically, it was a way in which you could escape. It was a way in which you could know something that your captors did not know, and it was definitely a way in which they communicated with each other, and they had their own language, which I thought was very interesting. Again, for those who've read it, that's actually a big part of the book, is that they talk to each other one way, and then they can speak with each other when they know, or at least they think it's safe to talk to each other, and, well, teach each other ways in which they can cope. So, on page 21, if anybody brought their book, I don't think it's important, he said, "That evening I sat down with Lizzie and 6 other children in our cabin and gave a language lesson." Lizzie is his daughter. "These were indispensable. Safe movement through the world depended on mastery of language fluency. The young one sat in a packed dirt floor, and I was on one of our 2 homemade stools. The hole in the roof pulled the smoke from the fire that burned in the middle of the shack. Papa, why do we have to learn this? White folks expect us to sound a certain way, and it can only help if we don't disappoint them," I said. "The only ones who suffer when they are made to feel inferior is us. Perhaps I should say, when they don't feel superior. So let's pause to review some of the basics." "Don't make eye contact," a boy said. "Virgil." "Never speak first," a girl said. "That's correct, February." Lizzie looked at the other children, then back to me. "Never address any subject directly when talking to another slave." And what do we call that? Together they said, signifying. Again, I love this notion that Jim had this little, this gig that he put on, that he acted one way when he was with Huck and Tom or any of the other people that he was around, but when he's around the people that he can trust and the people that he has to make sure are going to survive, he knew that he had to play a part. Page 23 talks about the existence of God, which is sad, but I can understand entirely. They're talking about, again, survival skills. He says, what if they don't understand when talking to another white person? He's like, that's okay. Let them to work to understand you. Mumble sometimes so they can have the satisfaction of telling you not to mumble. They enjoy the correction of thinking you're stupid. Remember that the more you choose not to want to listen, the more we can say to one another around them. Why did God set it up like this, Rachel asked, with them as masters and us as slaves? There is no God, child. There's a religion, but there's no God of theirs. Their religion tells them or that they will get their reward in the end. However, it apparently doesn't say anything about their punishment. But when we're around them, we believe in God. Oh, Lordy Lord, we be believing. Religion is just a controlling tool that they employ and they adhere to when it's convenient. There must be something, Virgil said. I'm sorry, Virgil. You might be right. There might be some higher power, children. but it's not their white God. However, the more you talk about God and Jesus and heaven and hell, the better they feel. The children said together, and the better they feel, the safer we are. It's funny because as I was reading about this and looking to, have some ideas of why he did what he did and what he was doing with it, I made the mistake, or I shouldn't say mistake, I read some criticism, and there's some odd ones out there. One was about the use of play acting and how the role of performance in the book, and I'm like, okay, that was interesting, but who cares? I didn't understand really what the focus of that would have been. The interesting things I read were from Reddit. Whew. I was shocked at how many people were upset by the book because Jim just wasn't the way he was in the other. You know? How dare he? Jeez. I am purposely setting up some things here because I thought it was interesting to see what Jim was like when the book began. Page 35, I've written my note. It says, Jim learns he's being sold and he runs away. And he overhears and is given some pretty good information that the widow plans to sell him down to New Orleans, and he's going to be separated from his family. After he has a long kind of thought about it, the most important thing is that he says goodbye to his family, and the most important thing he says is that I will be back for you. I will return. And I'm thinking to myself, just the idea of put myself into that position, which I think this book does a very nice job of. What would you do? What would it be like for you to be in that position where he's just taken a lot of time to talk to his kids and he's told them all about how important it is to lay low, to not make any waves, to do everything you can to make the people around you, the white folk, happy, and so that they're not unhappy with you, and then to be faced with such a huge decision to leave that all behind and to leave your family behind to what might happen to them and having no control. So, I think everything up to this point, if you read Huck Finn and you remember everything about it, is fairly the same. Again, the fun part about that is what he does, some of the stuff that's still there, the Jim stuff. Remember, he's with Huck. Page 42, it's when they first are hiding out on the island, and Huck has already created his own death. And he says, they were talking about superstition and the meaning like behind Huck's widow's peak. He says, let's see, heck Jim, your head does the same thing as mine does. Pull your hair back. And then I do it, I touch my hair, I reckon it do. What do you suppose it means, a widow peak? Is that good luck? Sure ain't for me, Huck said. And after a spell of science, I caught Huck staring at me. What, I asked. Being a slave, you gotta do whatever your owner says to do. Huh. Whatever, I can't even do whatever they say, I said. Whatever they say I jump, I say I jump how high. They say spit, I say how far. How can one person own another person? That'd be a good question, Huck. Look what I found. Huck showed me a length of snakeskin, and he pushed it towards me, but I pulled away. Be bad luck to handle a snakeskin, I said. Snake might come back looking for his clothes. Who's superstitious now? That ain't superstition. That's just common sense. Huck laughed. What superstitions do you have? Do you know, Jim? Don't walk under no ladder. I know that one. I don't believe it. So you'd walk under a ladder? No, sir. Just ain't safe to walk under a ladder. That ain't bad luck. Black cats are supposed to be bad. White cats are only black cats. And black cats bad, and white cats are okay. What if I see an owl in the daytime? I was barely listening to him. What was I worried about? Sadie and Lizzie. Owl, I said, daytime? Lottie, how that there isn't going to be any bad business. That means somebody going to meet his maker. I could see that answer made him happy. But that don't make it superstitious. That just means I get more good sense. Like I said, for one thing for sure, it's going to rain like crazy tomorrow, so we best stow away from some food and get ready to hunker down. Why do you think it's going to rain? I see lots of them hawks flying around. You know, they do that before it rains. And I ain't seen ants building piles around the holes. And of course, right after this, it rains. Just like it does in the original novel, and it rains for days, and it causes the flood, which will eventually bring the house down, where we're going to find a hawk's pap dead inside the house, and the other things. What I thought was interesting was his little mix between the two places. He obviously wants to make the boy feel good about their positions and where they are and the way in which Jim is supposed to be. But at the same time, Jim, sure, he's probably somewhat superstitious. I know I still am. But he's also very smart. He understands when he sees certain things happening that it's going to rain. He understands how to read the world and what nature is all about. And not just the fact that, yes, there are some superstitions or just common sense. You don't walk under a ladder because it just isn't safe. But then there's things that you can see that tell you what's actually happening in the world, and it's worthwhile to take notice. They find the dead man in the house. He keeps it to himself. Page 46 to 47. I thought it was interesting about Jim gets bitten by the snake. And he talks about the irony and snake bite, which of course now we're really picking up on Jim's command of the language and his intelligence. So he says, it wasn't delicious, what was it? It wasn't delicious the longer we chewed it. They had found some backstrap bacon or whatever it was in the house. And they had to chew it in order to actually swallow it. I wonder who he was, Huck said, talking about the dead man. It'll be bad luck to study on dead folk, I told him. You already stacking on that bad luck after handling a rattlesnake. Or the snake skin. The bacon's awful, sure enough, but we kept chewing. You heard that one about not putting mirrors and facing mirrors, Huck said? Huck asked. I looked at his young eyes and I thought about Lizzie. I wondered just how scared she was for me at that moment, and hated the idea of her feeling fear, and I realized I hated it, because I knew that feeling so well every day and every night. And I laughed at myself, but I didn't know why. What is it? The boy asked. And I couldn't use the word irony with him. But show be funny, ain't it? What? Here we is chewing on this terrible bacon and me a runaway and you a dead boy. They done think that I done that. I killed you. And sure enough, that's exactly what everybody comes to the conclusion of. Because of course it couldn't have been his father. Moving on to some other interesting things that happens to Jim, and this is still, as I said early on. How am I doing on time? Good. Jim he gets bitten by the snake, and then afterwards, he obviously has a horrible fever. He's going through all his throes of fighting the poison, and interestingly, in his delirium, he ends up having a dream about discussing slavery with Voltaire. So Jim is well read enough that he knows his Voltaire. And he doesn't know just Voltaire, because on page 49, he says, Voltaire's looking at him through his haze, and he says, you shouldn't be a slave, Voltaire said, sighing. He sat beside me and moved to feel my forehead with the back of his hand, and then thought better, like Montesquieu, which I'm sure I said incorrectly, I think we are all equal regardless of color, language, or habit. Oh, you do you? I asked. However, you must realize that climate and geography can be a significant factor in determining human development. It's not that your features make you unequal, it's that they are signs of a biological difference, and those things have helped you survive in those hot, desolate places. It's those factors that stop you from achieving the more perfect human form found in Europe. Is that right? The African can be easily trained in the ways of the European, of course. He can come to be more than he naturally is, to learn those manners and skills that will allow him to become equal. Yes? That is what equality is, Jim. It's the capacity for becoming equal. The same way a black man in Martinique can learn French and so become French, he can also acquire the skills of equality and so become equal. But I repeat myself. I hate you, I said through my fever and chills. You realize, of course, that I've been bitten by a snake only to have you come to me in a delirium. Yes, but all men are equal, that's my point. But even if you have to admit the presence of, shall we call him, the devil in your African humans. Voltaire adjusted his position and held his hands to the fire. You're saying we're equal but also inferior? I'm detecting a disapproving tone, he said. Listen, my friend, I'm on your side. I'm against the institution of slavery of any kind, you know. That I'm an abolitionist of the first order. Thank you. You're welcome. You do not believe that humans are intently bad, I asked. I do not. If they were, they would kill as soon as they could walk. How do you explain slavery? Why are people subjected to it and treated with such cruelty? Voltaire shrugged. Let me try this, I said. You have a notion like a Reynolds of natural liberties, and we all have them by virtue of our being human. But when those liberties are put under societal and cultural pressure, they become civil liberties, and those are contingent on hierarchy and situation. Am I close? Voltaire scribbles on a piece of paper. That was good. That was good. Could you say that all again? What was hilarious, and it's actually quite funny, is Huck's listening to him ramble during all this. And he's like, Jim, you talk funny when you're asleep. What does hierarchy mean? And Jim answers with, what? There ain't no such word. Moving to the end of that little discussion, because of course they do have a couple of good talks, Jim and Huck, about the nature of being a slave and whatever. And Jim ends on 52. I was even more afraid of further unreproductive, imagined conversations with Voltaire, Rousseau, and Locke about slavery, race, and of all things, albinism. How strange a world, how strange an existence that one's equal must argue for one's equality, that one's equal must hold a station that allows airing of that argument, that one cannot make that argument for oneself, that premises of said argument must be vetted by those equals who do not agree. I really enjoyed the book for those moments. Those really great, what would you call them? These are obviously our author is speaking to us directly through the book. And I guess what I enjoyed a lot is that, again, if you think about Huck Finn, that's one of the best things about Twain, is that when he wrote his stuff, he would have story and some character and whatever, but every once in a while there's wonderful gems where Twain just speaks to us and lets us know what we should get out of it. So, if you remember correct, or what happens, at least in this book, is that Jim not only finds some books on that wreck, or in the house that had gone down, but he finds an ink and pen. And he finally has his first chance, and he opens up one of the books and he writes inside the book, page 55. And it's one of the first things that he says, and I thought it was wonderful. I am called Jim. I have yet to choose a name. In the religious preachings of my white captors, I am a victim of the curse of Ham. But white masters cannot embrace their cruelty and greed, but must look to that lying Dominican friar for religious justification. But I will not let this condition define me. I will not let myself, my mind, drown in fear and outrage. I will be outraged as a matter of course. But my interest is in how these marks that I am scratching on this page can mean anything at all. If they can have meaning, then life can have meaning. Then I can have meaning. Going back to one of those interesting Reddits, there was somebody who took, not just somebody, several people were very upset at the notion that Jim could only find meaning in himself, or that he only existed, so to speak, because he had the ability to write, because he had the ability to communicate, and that somehow that took something away from the original Jim. Oh, let's see. Page 69 in their stuff, he finds more books, if you remember correctly, in the novel, the original, the Walter Scott, the paddle boat had sunk, and they go aboard it because Huck wants to look for treasure and other things, and while they're on that, again, also in the book, they come across the thieves, and Huck finds the thieves about to murder another man. He realizes the trouble they're in, they have to escape from it really quickly, but Huck, being pretty quick on his feet, realizes that if he sets the thieves' boat free and they steal it, and then he takes their plunder, it leaves them high and dry and lets Jim and Huck escape. It was at this point that I thought it was interesting, at least, to do some of those juxtapositions that I wanted to talk about. Do you remember ever talking about Huck Finn and how throughout the book, the safest place in the story always seemed to be the river? Like every time, like the river was almost like a symbol of freedom. They got on a raft that had no real direction to it, And it just took them places. And the only real trouble that they usually found themselves in was when the raft would come to shore. And it was in those places that they came into contact with civilization. And they had to escape it over and over again. And they always found some sort of safety in the raft. Not so in this book. He finds the flooded house and the dead pap inside the house. When they first get onto the raft and they try to fish, they catch copperheads and almost get bitten again by snakes. They find the broken paddle boat, and when they go to it, they find thieves on board and they face more danger. They face fog and the possibility of being run over by other boats. Lightning and the idea that if they are on the river and the danger of them being in the river, because the lightning could obviously, instant death. The next wrecked riverboat is nothing but danger. And then I thought it was interesting because as we go on, it wasn't just the river that found danger for, obviously, Jim's story. Yes, every time they went out there, for him, it was just more fear. It was more things that could be found. Whether he's hiding under the tarp, and Huck comes up with that great lie that it's, oh, this is my uncle and he has smallpox. And it immediately makes them not only get away from the boat, but they all give him money. Because, oh no, they really feel bad for him. But everywhere Jim goes, whether it's on the boat and on the river or on land, he's in danger, in fear of his life, and should be in fear of his life. And he faces danger everywhere he goes. And I thought he did a really great job of capturing that. There is no safe place for the black man. It was a great adventure for Huck, but that's not what it is for him. Page 73 makes a comment about reading and freedom, because again, he found more books, and Huck can't make out, why'd you keep those books, Jim? They just feel good. There's something satisfying about just holding on to it. And of course, Huck's, okay, whatever, doesn't understand it at all. And Jim's wondering, how in the world is he going to read these books if Huck's around? And he comes to the realization, I love it. I really wanted to read. Though Huck was asleep, I could not chance his waking and discovering me with my face in an open book. And then I thought, how could he know what I was actually reading? I could simply claim to be staring dumbly at the letters and words and wondering what in the world they meant. How could he know? At that moment, the power of reading made itself clear and real to me. If I could see the words, then no one could control them or what I got from them. They couldn't even know if I was merely seeing them or reading them, sounding them out or comprehending them. It was a completely private affair and completely free, and therefore completely subversive. Page 75, more character development. They're talking about names. What would you do, Jim, if you could choose your own name? And they talk about different things and what it would be, because of course Jim was just given his name. And he comes up with the idea, he says, if I could rename myself, Huck said something about it, I'd be like Hawkeye. And what about you, Jim, what would you say? And he says, go lightly. What? That'd be my name. Go lightly. Jim, go lightly. Huck said, sounds good. James, go lightly. We come to the smallpox and the escape. Page 83 again, same as the novel. They run across, steamboat, knocks them overboard. He almost drowns, Huck almost drowns, and it brings us to the Grangerfords and Shepherdsons. Because if you remember correctly, in the novel, they are separated. And really, we only know what happens to Huck. If you think about it, we find out a little bit. But it's really, Jim is left on his own. And so the interesting thing that happens, at least after that, was that page 99 when we come across that. And Jim has a discussion with John Locke. Doesn't everybody? You know what's I'm finding really heartening right now? Is one, having any kind of interaction after reading this book. Again, so many of the things I read on Reddit and the complaints they had about it was that Huck Finn was a satire, and it was funny, and it is. I have to say, there was a lot of really funny moments I read over again. One of my favorites was when Tom and Huck at the end, and they're trying to help Jim escape, and Tom, obviously during the whole thing, knows Jim's a free man, and there's no reason to do any of this. Tom's just a jerk. But Huck realizes after they did the final escape, and Tom gets shot in the leg when they're running away, and he's in real danger now. Huck runs to get help, and he finds a doctor, and he goes to the doctor, and he realizes, I can't explain that my friend Tom, who I'm pretending to be right now, was shot because we were trying to help this slave escape, and I need you to come help him because he won't do it. So he comes up with this thing, and he's like, so what happened to your friend? He got shot. How did he get shot? He got shot in his sleep. Interesting. How did that happen? He had a dream, and it shot him. And the doc's answer was, that's a singular dream. There's some really great funny stuff. Just not real serious. So, Jim has this dream, page 102. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I saw a gaunt but not too tall figure walking on the water, out of the water, toward me. His angular face might have been distinguished, but I reserved such valuations for after I'd heard someone speak. If it isn't John Locke, I said. James? I knew I was dead asleep and dreaming, but I didn't know whether John Locke knew that. I've been busy thinking about you, I said. I've been pondering hypocrisy. Oh, don't start with that now, he said. It was a job after I wrote the Constitution for the Barbados, and the Carolinians asked me to write them one too, and I wrote it. So what you're saying is that if someone pays you enough, it's okay to abandon what you have claimed to understand as moral and right. When you put it that way, I put it that way what? They wanted a constitution that would justify their behavior. If I hadn't written it for them, someone else would have. The world would be different if that had happened. I looked at him. You tell me. Some might say that my views on slavery are complex and multifaceted. Convoluted and multifarious, reasoned and complicated, entangled and problematic, sophisticated and intricate, labyrinthine and daedalin. Well played, my dark friend. And Huck wakes him up. Why I thought it was interesting was because I read so many things on Reddit that said there's nothing funny in this book. I don't think there's anything funny either. I really don't. But it is worth laughing about. And any good satire, if you know it, you don't usually really laugh at it. A Modern Proposal, I don't think anybody walked away from that going, I think it's a great idea to kill and eat the poor. Well, let's all do it. You know what I mean? Great food source, gets rid of the poor. Sorry, you are with Jonathan Swift? I hope I didn't offend anybody. The Duke and Dauphine join him. Dauphine. The dolphin. I'm jumping ahead. Because I'm sure I'm going to run out of time if I don't. I guess up to this point, God, Jim's a thinker, a critic, reasoned, a good writer, gentle. He really looks out for Huck. It's in this book, it's in this book. It isn't until the Duke and the Dolphin basically finally sell Jim. Now that's in this book, but things really go. This is where it all really veers away. It's no longer Huck's book at that point. And he sees what kind of people these two are. And Jim over and over again tries to tell Huck, they're going to try to get rid of me, they're going to sell me off, Huck. We get away from them. And again, just like in the other book, they try, and things don't work out exactly the way that happens. When they finally do it and get away, and the Duke and Dolphin realize that they were trying to get away from them, the Duke and Dolphin whip Jim. Now, up to this point, we find out that Jim had only been whipped once by the judge, Judge Thatcher. We'll get to that later. And they don't want to hurt Jim too much because then they can't sell him if he's been whipped too much. It doesn't look good. He must be the kind of slave that you can't just, he's not docile enough and he won't do the work. And then two, they don't want to hurt him because then he can't work hard enough. But they're going to whip him anyway, and he tells them to drop his drawers. And I love this little moment because it's on 131, and the Duke slapped Huck away. And of course, one of the things that Jim is being very careful of is he doesn't want any harm to happen to Huck. So he's being protective of Huck to the point where he's going to let them do this whipping. He says, "You can whip me, but I ain't dropping my drawers." "What did you say?" "I ain't dropping my drawers." The Duke swung the belt hard and caught my knees. It did hurt. He laughed and he did it again. I didn't wince. The king said, "I say, did you see that? They don't even feel like no human man." "He feels it," the Duke said, and he hit me again, 10 times around or so my thighs. I felt my flesh tear. It was a burning pain that brought me to the ground and on my knees, and the Duke had worked up a sweat. Huck was crying. "Don't tear him up too much," the king said. "We got to be able to sell him. We can't get a dime for him if he's torn all asunder." "Hell, man," the Duke said. "He ain't no proper people. He don't feel pain like we do. He need a lesson he can remember. Nextwise, he'll get it in his head to run again. That's the way these creatures is built." "Stop," Huck cried. "There might be a little left over for you too, boy," the Duke said. Huck caught my eyes, telling him to back away. The tone from here on in sure as heck ain't Huck Finn that Mark Twain took. When they get to another part, and the Duke and Dauphine get drunk, and they leave Jim out with Huck, they realize we can't just leave him where he can get away at night. They want to go find a hotel and get more drunk. So they ask a slave that they find, who's a blacksmith, Easter, to make chains for Jim, and they're going to chain Jim up. And they do. And then as soon as the men are gone, Easter releases Jim and says, "You're going to feel a lot more comfortable without this." And they come back, and they find, the Duke and Dolphin find that Easter has let him go, and they beat or whip Easter. That doesn't go real well with Easter's owner. And the Duke and Dolphin are basically told, the only way you're going to make up for this is now my slave, Easter, can't make the horseshoes that I need. I'm taking Jim, and he'll do the work. And when he's paid it off, whatever, you can have him back again. But until he's paid for what you've caused, that's the way this is going to happen. So I skipped over a major part. And I did it on purpose so I could get to this part. And it's a major symbol. When Jim and Huck are separated and get to the part where the Grangerfords and Shepherdsons are, and they don't get back together again until the Grangerfords and Shepherdsons have killed each other off. Jim runs into some slaves that he befriends, and he sees them, and they don't tell him. It's interesting, they have a little tell that as soon as they see each other, he just says, "Fred," and then they realize that they can trust each other. They offer to help him. He's like, "I don't want you to do anything. You know what? I don't want anything major from you." So they do it anyway. They hide out. They bring him some food, and he asks just one simple thing. He's like, "If you could just get me one thing," because of course after they wreck the raft, he loses his ink and pen, and he asks for a pencil. And they're like, "I don't know." And later on, young George, one of the characters that are in there, the slave, brings him a pencil, because while he was helping out with his master and doing stuff, the master dropped his pencil in some stuff, and they looked for it, and while he did that, he pocketed it, and then brought it to Jim. And young George says, "What are you going to write about him?" He says, "I don't know." He says, "Just tell your story. You got to tell what happened so that other people know." So later on, as they're about to get away from everything, and Jim knows that he's in trouble because there's a big kerfuffle, and he goes over to find it, and they have caught young George, and he's being whipped at the stake. And he has a moment where he makes eye contact with young George, and young George just mouths to him, run. We get to Easter, and Easter tells him a story because now the two of them can talk, and he's working with them, and Easter makes a comment about how they never leave us alone, and they don't think about it, but the most dangerous time you can leave us alone is while we're working and nobody thinks that we have anything to say. And those are the times we can communicate and tell what we need to tell. And Easter said there was a lynching upriver. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Guess what it was for? I wasn't going to guess, and Easter didn't expect me to, and I raked my brow with my form, and I looked at him. A pencil and an ice-cold spear hit the back of my stomach. A what? A pencil. Can you believe that? A slave was accused of stealing a damn pencil, and they hanged him dead for it. They didn't even find the pencil on him. What's a slave need a pencil for? Can you believe that? White folks watch us work and forget how when we're left alone in our heads, working and waiting. I smiled. If only they knew the danger in that. I don't believe they even know we talk to each other, Easter said. They can't accept it. They won't accept it. And they're always very surprised. You hear about Denmark Vesey, and he almost took over in South Carolina and had guns and organization. What happened? Hanged him, of course. They hanged him, found out his plans, and hanged him. Gosh, I could probably spend 2 hours on this. I know we probably don't have to say. So, a lot of other stuff happens. The most interesting of which is right after this, Jim ends up being sold because he's singing while making his horseshoes, and a minstrel group comes by. A literal group that paints their face black and then pretends they sing songs and make fun of black slaves for the entertainment of white people. And the leader of the minstrels hears Jim sing, and they need a tenor, and they think that Jim would be a great person to take over. And he basically buys Jim and elicits him to pretend to be black and sing. Come on, satire? It's good stuff. I'm going to do my best right now not to go on and tell you exactly how it turns out, but I will tell you that it's very different from this book. And Jim is going to, instead of being the docile black man that Huck gets into a lot of scrapes, and a good man who protects Huck from all sorts of things, which he does, Jim sees real ugly stuff. And I guess what I thought was a very good part of the book is that, like any book that's going to take on really horrific things that have happened in history, it doesn't shy away from letting us know that really horrific things happened then. And it changes him. And Jim is not the same person that the book starts with. And he turns into a man not just driven to take action, but a man of vengeance. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who read it and are bothered by that. And I guess that's where I'd like to start with. If you know the book, I am dying to have this discussion. And if you got to the end, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. And if you don't know the book, well, it's okay. I don't think anybody has to ruin it entirely. But I do, let's face it, I'm going to start it out with this. It's a piece of fiction. It's taken on by a black man who's living right now in our time period. And he got to write his story from his point of view. James. So, are you bothered by the end? And what happens? Or, how do you feel about it? Because for those people who might watch like a Tarantino movie, where all of a sudden in Inglourious Bastards, the Jews rise up and kick some good Hitler ass. I know that's not how it went, but it's an interesting story. And that's exactly what Tarantino does. That movie starts with Once Upon a Time. And he does the same thing with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where, interestingly enough, before Helter Skelter begins, some random dude comes along and puts an end to it. In such a great way. Again, if you watch that movie, God, you feel like, what's wrong with it? I don't know. Anybody want to start out with any part of that discussion, or heck, just ask me questions. I am open to anything you'd like to talk about, because I know I've only left about 12 minutes to do that, so. Nothing? Yes.
So if I haven't read Huck Finn since high school, should I read it before James?
I didn't, and I gotta say, it didn't bother me at all. I think you'll find that as you go, everything you need to remember about Huck Finn will come back.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I didn't, because it had been a long time since I taught it. And so, yeah. Now, in preparing this, I definitely had to go back. I couldn't remember exactly when certain things happened. And so that was, I also forgot how long the escape, the helping Jim escape part took. It actually pissed me off. It did. It's infuriating when you think about how long they left him in there and everything that they did. Just for some fun. Yeah.
I haven't read this book yet, but I recently read Huck Finn, and after many years, and I just thought it was a genius.
It's beautiful.
Yes, it is, but again, as I said, I haven't read this, but I felt that James, being slain and speaking in his dialogue and everything else, that Twain portrayed him as a very intelligent man.
I don't disagree.
And very honorable. So that really struck me, and he brought out a lot of points about Huck, why Huck was so confused that I'm not supposed to like this because he's, I won't say the word, but he's black. I'm really interested in reading this book.
Yeah, I thought, obviously, Everett knows Huck Finn, and he knows what the character of Huck was all about. I thought he was, it's incredibly respectful what he does. I just thought he fills in gaps that perhaps, why couldn't Jim be an intelligent reader? I didn't see any reason why he couldn't be. Especially, it definitely provides a reason why he wouldn't have let us know certain things. Yeah.
So if you were still teaching, would you be tempted to follow up Huck Finn with James?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I was really disappointed by? Has anybody read Go Set a Watchman?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? To Kill a Mockingbird?
Oh, yeah.
What a disappointment.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not upset anybody. It doesn't happen too often where I take a book and throw it across the room when I'm done. But yeah, I wanted to rip it up and burn it. But yeah, that did not set well with me. So I did not Go Set a Watchman with To Kill a Mockingbird. But I think this would be worthwhile. Very worthwhile. Especially when it comes to point of view.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I reread this of how prolific the N-word was. And I was just really bothered. I don't know. I just find that the older I've gotten and the more I'm just bothered. And believe me when I say that I am not, this was written in 1880, whatever, and for a reason, and I'm not going to pretend that was not prolific. I don't think that would be fair. The same way when I taught for years Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, I think Taming of the Shrew is an incredibly worthwhile play to read, but you have to read it in the context of when, and then again, it's really worthwhile to know what came first and what Shakespeare based his play on and how he changed it because of, it makes it a wonderful play. But it's still not. It's only kind of misogynistic. That doesn't mean it's not worth it. You can't know what you don't know. You can't. When you're immersed in that as your society, I don't know. Yes?
What do you think Percival is trying to tell us about today in this book? And maybe, or is he trying to do the same
A couple
thing
different
Twain
things.
was trying to tell Americans about themselves?
I think the hypocrisy of it all, how infuriating it must be to see that how little has changed.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it in just for people of color, although obviously that is it very much, but I would say that for anyone on the outside is facing some very huge hurdles and it hasn't stopped. I think as a cautionary tale, his ending is a turn towards anger and retribution. And I think like any good tale, that is something to consider, whether it's Tale of Two Cities or A Modern Proposal. Let's face it, all good satire should make us look at ourselves and not just see the problem, but want to change it, or else. So that's my guess. I would love for him to be here and tell me how full of crap I am. That's happened multiple times in my life. It's wonderful. Hey, it is. I don't know. For a great part of my teaching career, I taught feminism. I purposely picked books because of their feminist nature. And it all was because when I was, I guess it was my grad school, I ended up taking a course on the Brontes. And this spitfire of a 4'10", weighed 85 pounds professor that I had, who was probably the first lesbian I ever had a chance to talk to and learn from, made it clear what an asshole I was. It was a really wonderful part of the book. She's talking about whatever, and she was talking about the fear a woman felt in walking down the street, and then she was being followed by another guy. And she talked about something that only women probably would understand, that when you are in a position where a guy might be just near you, there's always an inherent possible fear because you just don't know. And so she was explaining that this captures that moment, and I made a joke. So when he walked up to her and said, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to blah, blah, blah?" And the people laughed, and she did not. It was a great mistake on my part, because I learned a lot. So I spent a life making up for it. Making up for the mistake. I try. I'll never know what it truly feels like to be a woman, but I have 2 daughters, and I know it's important.
Yes.
So, 4 more minutes. Sorry?
Where did you go to college?
Fredonia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Because I was too afraid to go anywhere too far away. I'm from Jamestown, New York. If you're familiar with that, it was a 22-minute drive. Yeah.
How was Huckleberry received when it was originally published?
That's a freaking great question. It was banned. I did a little looking into it. Of course, there was a lot of people that saw it for what it was, and it was accepted in a lot of various places. But in multitudes of areas, it was literally outright banned for its subversiveness and the message that it was conveying. Yeah. So, just like now, nothing's changed.
What year was it published?
1880, 84. You'd think I just know that off the top of my head. I'm going to look to make sure I say the exact right date. 1884.
You got it.
That was, yeah. You know what's really weird? I had forgotten again until I looked into it. For some reason, I thought it was pre-Civil War. So I was shocked that it was a book about, I don't know. Again, I don't know.
That's the thing where it just shows the current situation, and people are offended by it. Because it's
Some people are offended by it. Oh yeah.
that you're making fun
I would say anybody who's hurt by history and how that makes them feel just has some internal growing to do. That's all. Like I had to find out in my poorly timed joke about feminism. Yeah.
You can bring it back, you can go Hispanic,
Does it matter?
Asian, you can go women, you can go alphabet, you can go any.
Yep. Yep. LGBTQ. We are officially at the hour mark. Yes.
One final one. How do you think this talk would do in rural Mississippi right
I'd
now?
probably be escorted out. I don't know, it depends on the, I must face it would depend on the school district and where that was. I don't know. I know that I'm a super lucky person that, if you've ever seen some of the shows I've ever done or whatever, I push the envelope. I've been very lucky to be in places that have just put up with me. And I know for a fact that I've taught books, or what I've taught in books would have been totally unaccepted. Like, I would not have been able to do it in my hometown of Jamestown. Period. In discussions, there were things that, and here's what kills me. This one's a problem. I could teach anything violent that I wanted, but God forbid it had anything that talked about sex. Oh no, don't let sex come on. Yes.
Do you happen to know, is Huck Finn on that list of 200 plus banned books?
Yes,
and
absolutely,
It is,
100%.
yeah.
Now, not always for the same reasons you would think. I would say that a great many places ban it for the N-word. I'm not going to make that. I can see where that's perfectly fine. I would have. Now that I read it, I really feel. Yeah, I used to read it aloud, and I wouldn't, not that way. Yeah.
But that book couldn't have really been written if you had used the N-word in it, to be correct. That's the whole, why it gets it so much, see, really.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing
I
on
know,
that.
but I'm disagreeing that it's.
No, all I can say is that I reread it, and I didn't realize how prolific it was, and I realized how much it bothered me.
Yeah, same here.
Now, should we be bothered? Yes! Yes! Read stuff that bothers you. That's how you know where you stand. And if it doesn't bother you, maybe you've got some soul searching to do. Yep. I'm okay with saying that. Get your act together. We good? Thank you.